Samuel Nelson stood in the center of his bustling restaurant, the Urban Haven, in New York City. The ambient light reflected off the polished cutlery and crystal glasses, creating a warm, inviting atmosphere. Every detail, from the fresh flowers on each table to the meticulously arranged seating, bore the mark of Samuel's unwavering dedication to excellence. His eyes scanned the dining room, ensuring everything was perfect, as it always had to be. Samuel's thoughts were interrupted by a commotion near the entrance. Curious, he glanced over and saw a small boy, no older than 10, standing on the sidewalk. The boy was selling sweets, his clothes worn and his face smeared with dirt. There was something about the boy's determined expression that struck a chord deep within Samuel, stirring memories he had long kept buried. He watched as the boy approached passers-by with a mix of hope and desperation. Most ignored him, too absorbed in their own lives to notice the struggle of a child. Samuel felt a pang of empathy. He remembered what it was like to be that boy, struggling to survive in a world that seemed indifferent to his existence. Samuel stepped outside, the crisp evening air contrasting with the warmth inside the restaurant. He approached Peter with a gentle smile. "Hey there," he said, keeping his tone casual. "Selling sweets?" Peter looked up, his eyes wide with surprise and caution. "Yes, sir," he replied, his voice barely audible. Samuel knelt to be at eye level with Peter. "How about you take a break and have a meal with me?" "My treat." Peter hesitated, glancing at the sweets in his hands and then back at Samuel. His stomach growled audibly, betraying his hunger. "I don't know, sir. I need to sell these." Samuel nodded understandingly. "I get it, but you can't work on an empty stomach. Come inside, have a meal, and we can talk. You can leave your sweets here. They'll be safe." After a moment's pause, Peter nodded slowly. "Okay," he said, his voice still laced with uncertainty, but edged with hope. Samuel led Peter into the Urban Haven, guiding him to a small table near the back where they could talk privately. The boy's eyes widened as he took in the opulence of the restaurant. Samuel motioned for a waiter. "Bring us 2 of the special tonight," he said. As they waited for their food, Samuel watched Peter closely. The boy's eyes darted around, taking in every detail of the restaurant. Despite his obvious hunger, there was a cautiousness in his demeanor, a wariness that spoke volumes about his life on the streets. Samuel Nelson sat across from Peter in a quiet corner of the Urban Haven, the soft hum of the bustling restaurant around them. The boy's eyes darted around, taking in the opulence of the place. The table between them held 2 plates of steaming pasta, the aroma filling the air. "Eat up," Samuel encouraged, noting the hesitation in Peter's movements. "It's good, I promise." Peter took a tentative bite, his eyes widening slightly as the flavors hit his palate. The boy's wariness began to melt away as he ate with increasing fervor. Samuel watched him, memories of his own childhood struggles surfacing. "So, Peter," Samuel began gently, "tell me about yourself. How long have you been selling sweets?" Peter paused, fork halfway to his mouth. "A while," he said, shrugging. "Since my dad died." Samuel nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I'm sorry to hear that. Must be tough on you and your mum." Peter's gaze dropped to his plate. "Yeah. She's not well. Hasn't been since Dad passed. It's just me and her now." The boy's words tugged at Samuel's heart. He remembered all too well the pain of losing a parent, the struggle to keep going when the world seemed to crumble around him. His mind flashed back to his own father, the bitterness and anger that had filled their home. "What's your mom's name?" Samuel asked, trying to keep his tone light. "Julia," Peter replied. She used to be really happy, you know? But now, she's always tired, always sad. Samuel's thoughts drifted to his mother, who had left when he was just a child. He had been raised by his father, a man consumed by his own demons. The parallels between his past and Peter's present were stark. "She must be proud of you helping out like this," Samuel said, offering a small smile. Peter shrugged again. "I guess. I just wish things were different." Silence settled between them for a moment, broken only by the clinking of cutlery and the soft murmur of conversations from other diners. Samuel took a deep breath, grappling with the memories that Peter's story had stirred up. "You know," Samuel began, his voice steady, "I wasn't much older than you when I had to fend for myself. My father, he wasn't a good man, made my life pretty hard." Peter looked up, curiosity flickering in his eyes. "What happened?" Samuel hesitated, then decided to share a piece of his past. "I ran away, couldn't take it anymore, ended up on the streets, just like you. It was rough, but then someone helped me, gave me a chance to turn my life around." "Who?" Peter asked, leaning forward slightly. "A woman named Julia," Samuel said, a smile touching his lips at the memory. "She took me in, taught me everything I know about cooking. She believed in me when no one else did." The boy seemed to ponder this, his fork playing with the food on his plate. "I wish my mum could get better. It's hard seeing her like this." Samuel reached across the table, placing a hand on Peter's. "Peter, I want to help, not just tonight, but moving forward. How about you bring your mum here for dinner tomorrow? We can talk more, see what we can do." Peter's eyes widened in surprise. "Really? You'd do that?" "Absolutely," Samuel said firmly. "Everyone deserves a chance, you and your mum included." Peter's cautious optimism was palpable. "Okay, I'll ask her. Thank you, Mr. Nelson." "Call me Samuel," he corrected gently. "And you're welcome, Peter. Now finish your dinner. We've got a lot to plan for tomorrow." As Peter resumed eating, Samuel leaned back in his chair, lost in thought. He remembered the days of scrounging for food, the cold nights spent alone, and the despair that had once gripped him. Helping Peter and his mother felt like coming full circle, a way to honor the woman who had saved him. The evening wore on, and as the last of the diners trickled out, Samuel and Peter made their way to the door. The boy's shoulders seemed lighter, his steps more assured. Samuel watched him disappear into the night, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. Tomorrow he would meet Julia, and, together, they would find a way to give Peter the chance he deserved. It was the least Samuel could do, a promise born from the kindness he had once received and now could offer to another. Samuel Nelson stood in the heart of the urban haven, meticulously overseeing the preparations for a special dinner. The restaurant, usually buzzing with energy, had been reserved for a private event. He adjusted the table settings for the 10th time, ensuring every detail was perfect. His anticipation and anxiety were palpable, and he couldn't help but feel a knot of unease tightening in his stomach. He glanced at his watch. Almost time. He took a deep breath, attempting to calm his nerves. This dinner was more than just a meal, it was a bridge to the past, a chance to repay a debt he could never forget. He moved to the front of the restaurant, waiting for their arrival. The doorbell chimed softly, and Samuel turned to see Peter and his mother, Julia, stepping inside. Peter's face lit up with a mixture of excitement and nervousness, but it was Julia who took Samuel's breath away. Time had etched lines on her face, but her eyes held the same warmth and strength that had once saved him. "Good evening," Samuel greeted them, his voice steady but his heart pounding. "I'm so glad you could make it." Peter grinned. Thank you for inviting us, Mr. Nelson. Samuel, he corrected with a smile. Please, come in. As Julia stepped forward, their eyes met. Recognition flickered across her face, and she froze, her eyes widening. Samuel? She whispered, her voice a mix of disbelief and emotion. Samuel nodded, his throat tightening. Yes, Julia, it's me. The room seemed to hold its breath as they stood there, the weight of years and memories hanging between them. Peter looked from his mother to Samuel, sensing the depth of the moment, but not fully understanding it. Julia, Samuel began, his voice breaking slightly, I never thought I'd see you again. You saved my life. Julia's eyes filled with tears. Samuel, look at you. You've become everything I always knew you could be. They moved towards each other, and Samuel gently took her hands. The touch was grounding, real. Thank you, he said simply, his voice filled with gratitude. Julia squeezed his hands, her eyes searching his. I'm so proud of you, Samuel. I always believed in you. Peter watched, silent and wide-eyed, as the reunion unfolded. Samuel turned to him, smiling. Peter, your mother is the reason I am who I am today. She believed in me when no one else did. Peter's eyes widened. Really? Mum, you knew Mr. Nelson? Julia nodded, wiping a tear from her cheek. Yes, Peter. I met Samuel when he was about your age, struggling just like you. Samuel guided them to the table, the conversation flowing more naturally as they settled in. The food arrived, and Samuel watched as Peter eagerly dug in, his youthful enthusiasm bringing a smile to Samuel's face. How have you been, Julia? Samuel asked gently, turning his attention to her. Peter mentioned you've been having a tough time. Julia sighed, a shadow crossing her features. It's been hard, Samuel. After my husband died, everything fell apart. I've been trying to keep things together for Peter, but it's been a struggle. Samuel nodded, understanding the unspoken weight of her words. You're not alone anymore, Julia. We'll figure this out together. She looked at him, gratitude and relief mingling in her eyes. Thank you, Samuel. It means more than you know. As the evening progressed, the atmosphere shifted from the initial tension to one of comfort and familiarity. They reminisced about the past, recalling moments of hardship and triumph. Julia shared stories of Samuel's early days, his determination and resilience, while Samuel spoke of how those lessons had shaped his life and career. Through their conversation, the depth of their bond became evident. Samuel's respect and admiration for Julia were palpable, and her pride in his achievements shone through every word. Peter listened intently, absorbing the history that had shaped the people before him. I owe you everything, Julia, Samuel said quietly, as the dinner drew to a close. And now I want to help you and Peter. Whatever you need, I'm here. Julia's eyes glistened with unshed tears. You've already given us so much, Samuel. Just knowing you're here, it gives me hope. Samuel reached across the table, taking her hand once more. Hope is just the beginning. We'll make things better together. As they left the urban haven that night, the bond between them was stronger than ever. Samuel watched them go, a sense of purpose and fulfillment settling over him. The reunion had rekindled not only old memories, but also a new commitment to the people who had shaped his life. The quiet of Samuel's office was a stark contrast to the bustling energy of the urban haven. He sat at his desk, the dim light casting long shadows across the room. His mind drifted back to the dinner with Peter and Julia, stirring memories he had long buried. As he closed his eyes, the past washed over him, vivid and relentless. Samuel was 8 when his parents divorced. His mother remarried and moved far away, leaving him in the care of his father, a man consumed by alcohol and gambling. The once warm and loving home turned into a place of fear and neglect. Nights were filled with the smell of stale beer and the sound of breaking glass, punctuated by his father's slurred curses. "Samuel!" his father would roar, staggering into the small, dingy apartment. "Get out there and bring me some money. I need it." Samuel, trembling, would nod and slip out into the night. The city streets were a harsh and unforgiving place for a young boy. He wandered from block to block, his stomach growling and his heart heavy. He learned to beg, to plead with strangers for a few coins, knowing that his father would beat him if he returned empty-handed. The days blurred into a grim routine. Samuel would leave early in the morning, wandering the city, searching for scraps of food in trash cans, avoiding the older, more aggressive homeless men who saw him as competition. Nights were spent under bridges or in abandoned buildings where the cold bit through his thin clothes and rats scurried close by. One particularly harsh winter night, Samuel's resilience was put to the test. He huddled in a doorway, shivering uncontrollably, his breath visible in the icy air. The city was covered in a thick layer of snow, and his worn-out shoes offered little protection from the cold. He was weak from hunger, his body aching with fatigue. As he drifted in and out of sleep, he wondered how much longer he could survive this way. It was during one of these desperate nights that he met Julia. He had been rummaging through a dumpster behind a small diner, hoping to find something to eat. His fingers were numb, and his movements sluggish. He didn't notice Julia approaching until she spoke. "Hey there, are you okay?" Her voice was soft, filled with concern. Samuel looked up, startled. Standing before him was a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. He tried to stand up, but his legs wobbled, and he fell back against the dumpster. "Hold on," she said, moving closer. "You look like you could use a hot meal and a warm place to stay." Samuel's instinct was to run, to hide from this stranger, but there was something about her that made him pause. He nodded slowly, too exhausted to argue. Julia extended her hand, helping him to his feet. "Come with me," she said. "My name is Julia. Let's get you out of the cold." She led him into the diner, where the warmth and the smell of food enveloped him like a comforting blanket. Julia sat him down at a table and brought him a bowl of steaming soup. Samuel ate ravenously, tears streaming down his face as the hot liquid warmed him from the inside. Julia watched him with a mixture of sadness and determination. "You don't have to live like this," she said softly. "There's a better life out there for you." That night, Julia took Samuel to her home. It was small but cozy, filled with warmth and the smell of fresh bread. For the first time in years, Samuel slept in a bed, under a roof, without fear. He awoke to the sound of birds chirping and sunlight streaming through the window. Julia was in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared breakfast. "Good morning," she greeted him with a smile. "I made pancakes. Come and eat." Samuel hesitated, still unsure if this was real or just a cruel dream. But Julia's kindness was genuine. She became his guardian, teaching him to cook, to read, to believe in himself. Under her care, Samuel began to heal, both physically and emotionally. The memories faded, and Samuel opened his eyes, back in his office. The weight of the past lifted slightly, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. He owed everything to Julia, and now it was his turn to be the beacon of hope for Peter and his mother. Samuel stood up, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. He knew the journey wouldn't be easy, but he was determined to make a difference. For Julia, for Peter, and for himself. Samuel Nelson stood in front of a dilapidated apartment building, his heart heavy as he surveyed the surroundings. The neighborhood was a far cry from the bustling, vibrant streets near the urban haven. He took a deep breath and entered the building, the stale smell of neglect greeting him. As he climbed the stairs to the third floor, he couldn't shake the memories of his own past, memories of similar places filled with despair and hopelessness. Reaching apartment 3B, he knocked gently. The door creaked open, and Peter's face appeared, his eyes lighting up with recognition. "Mr. Nelson," Peter greeted, stepping aside to let Samuel in. "Please, come in." Samuel nodded and entered the small, dimly lit apartment. The place was sparse, with barely any furniture and an air of desolation. Julia was sitting on a worn-out sofa, her face pale and etched with exhaustion. She struggled to her feet, a weak smile on her lips. "Samuel, it's good to see you," she said softly. Samuel moved forward, gently taking her hand. "Julia, you don't need to get up. Sit, please." He glanced around the apartment, taking in the peeling paint and the drafty windows. His heart ached for Julia and Peter living in such conditions. He turned back to Julia, his resolve strengthening. "Julia, I've seen enough," he began, his voice steady. "You and Peter can't stay here. I've arranged for both of you to move in with me. I've also set up your medical treatment at the hospital in the city. It's time for a fresh start." Julia's eyes widened, her breath catching. "Samuel, I can't—" "You can," Samuel interrupted gently. "You've done so much for me. Let me do this for you." Peter looked between them, hope and uncertainty warring on his young face. "Mum, maybe we should listen to Mr. Nelson." Julia's resistance crumbled. She nodded slowly, tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you, Samuel. I don't know how to repay you." Samuel shook his head, smiling warmly. "You don't need to repay me. You gave me a chance when I needed it the most. Now, let's get you both out of here." The move happened quickly. Within a day, Julia and Peter were settled into Samuel's spacious apartment. The difference was stark. Warmth, comfort, and safety replaced the cold, bleak existence they had endured. Julia's first visit to the hospital was a mix of anxiety and relief. Samuel stayed by her side, offering silent support as the doctors conducted thorough examinations. The diagnosis was clear. Depression and untreated medical conditions had taken their toll. But with proper care and support, recovery was possible. Back at the apartment, Samuel found Julia sitting by the window, lost in thought. He approached her, gently placing a hand on her shoulder. "How are you feeling?" Julia sighed, looking up at him. "Overwhelmed but hopeful. It's been so long since I've felt anything close to hope." Samuel pulled up a chair and sat across from her. "I've been thinking," he said slowly. "How would you feel about coming to work at the urban haven? You were the one who taught me everything I know about cooking. I could use your expertise." Julia looked at him, surprise and uncertainty mingling in her eyes. "Samuel, it's been so long. I'm not sure I'm up to it." "I believe in you," Samuel said firmly, "just as you once believed in me. Take it one step at a time. We'll start slow, and you can find your rhythm again." Julia's eyes filled with gratitude. "I'll try, Samuel. For you, I'll try." The following week, Julia started at the urban haven. Her first days were challenging. Her hands trembled and her confidence wavered. But Samuel was always there, offering encouragement and gentle guidance. He made sure she wasn't overwhelmed, allowing her to ease back into the world she had once loved. As the days passed, Julia began to regain her footing. The familiar smells of spices and the rhythm of the kitchen slowly brought back her passion. She started experimenting with recipes, her creativity sparking once more. Samuel watched with quiet pride as Julia rediscovered her love for cooking. The turning point came one evening when Julia prepared a dish that left the staff speechless. The flavors were bold yet balanced, reminiscent of the magic she had once taught Samuel. The applause from the kitchen staff brought tears to her eyes, a testament to her journey back from the brink. Samuel approached her, a broad smile on his face. "I told you, Julia. You still have it." Julia wiped her tears, her smile shaky but genuine. "Thank you, Samuel, for everything." Samuel nodded, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. Helping Julia and Peter wasn't just about repaying a debt. It was about honoring the bond they shared and building a future filled with hope and promise. Samuel Nelson watched as Peter nervously adjusted his backpack outside of Midtown Academy, a prestigious school in New York City. The morning sunlight highlighted the boy's anxious expression. Samuel placed a reassuring hand on Peter's shoulder. "You'll do great," Samuel said, his voice steady. "Just be yourself." Peter looked up, eyes wide with uncertainty. "What if they don't like me? What if I can't keep up?" "You've got this," Samuel replied. "It's normal to feel nervous, but remember you're here because you belong." Peter nodded slowly, his grip on the backpack straps tightening. "Okay, I'll try." As Peter walked towards the school entrance, Samuel felt a swell of pride mixed with a hint of apprehension. This was a new beginning for Peter, and he knew the boy would face challenges, but he also believed in his resilience. The first few weeks were tough. Peter struggled to fit in, his background making him feel like an outsider among the other students. The structured environment of Midtown Academy was a stark contrast to his previous life. He found the rigorous academic expectations overwhelming at times, and the social dynamics of the school perplexing. "How was school today?" Samuel asked one evening as they sat down for dinner. Peter shrugged, pushing his food around his plate. "It was okay. Just different. Hard." Samuel nodded, understanding. "It's a big change, but give it time. You'll find your place." Peter looked up, meeting Samuel's gaze. "Thanks for believing in me." "Always," Samuel said with a smile. "You're stronger than you think." While Peter navigated his new academic world, Julia was experiencing her own transformation at the urban haven. As her health improved, so did her confidence. She began to immerse herself in the restaurant's operations. Her passion for cooking reignited. One afternoon, Samuel found Julia in the kitchen experimenting with a new recipe. The air was filled with the rich aroma of herbs and spices. "What's cooking?" Samuel asked, leaning against the counter. Julia looked up, a smile lighting her face. "Just trying something new. Thought I'd add a special dish to the menu." Samuel tasted a spoonful of the dish, his eyes widening in appreciation. "This is fantastic, Julia. You've still got it." She laughed, a sound that had become more frequent as she regained her strength. "It feels good to be back in the kitchen. I missed this." "And we missed having you here," Samuel replied warmly. "Your creativity is exactly what this place needs." As weeks turned into months, Julia's contributions to the restaurant became more significant. She introduced innovative dishes that quickly became customer favorites, her culinary skills and creativity shining through. The staff admired her expertise, and she earned their respect and affection. In the evenings, the three of them, Samuel, Julia, and Peter, would gather for dinner, sharing stories of their days. These moments became the cornerstone of their growing bond. They celebrated small victories together: Peter's improved grades, Julia's new dishes, and the restaurant's continued success. One evening, as they sat around the dining table, Peter looked up from his homework. "Mr. Nelson, do you think I'll ever get used to it? School, I mean." Samuel smiled. "It's Samuel, remember? And yes, I think you will. It just takes time. You're doing great." Peter nodded thoughtfully. I made a friend today. His name's Max. He likes soccer too." "That's wonderful, Peter," Julia said, her eyes shining with pride. "I'm so glad you're making friends." Peter's face lit up. "Yeah, he's pretty cool. Maybe I can invite him over sometime." "Of course," Samuel said. "We'd love to meet him." As the night wore on, Samuel reflected on how much had changed. The bond between them had grown stronger with each passing day. They had become more than just individuals navigating their own struggles. They had become a family. Julia's laughter filled the room as she recounted a funny story from the kitchen, and Peter chimed in with his own tales from school. Samuel felt a deep sense of contentment. This was what he had always hoped for, a sense of belonging, of connection. As they cleared the table and said their good nights, Samuel watched Peter head to his room and Julia to hers. He lingered for a moment, taking in the warmth of the home they had built together. Samuel Nelson was in his office going through the restaurant's monthly reports when he heard a commotion in the kitchen. He rushed out to find Julia leaning against the counter, pale and clutching her chest. "Julia, are you okay?" Samuel asked, his voice tinged with concern. She shook her head, trying to catch her breath. "I don't know. I just feel dizzy." "Sit down," Samuel said, guiding her to a chair. "We need to get you to a doctor." Peter, who had just returned from school, entered the kitchen and saw his mother. Panic flashed across his face. "Mum, what's wrong?" "We're going to the hospital," Samuel said, trying to keep his voice calm. "Peter, grab her coat." They quickly got Julia into the car, and Samuel drove to the nearest hospital, his mind racing with worry. Once there, the doctors took her in for examination, leaving Samuel and Peter in the waiting room, their anxiety palpable. Hours later, a doctor approached them. "Mr. Nelson?" Samuel stood up. "Yes, that's me. How is she?" The doctor sighed. "Julia is stable for now, but we've detected some complications. It appears that due to the lack of timely treatment in the past, her condition has left some lingering effects. These can cause occasional relapses, like the one she experienced today." Peter's eyes filled with tears. "Is she going to be okay?" "She will be with proper care and monitoring," the doctor reassured them, "but she needs to take it easy and follow a strict treatment plan." Samuel nodded, the weight of the news settling heavily on his shoulders. "Thank you, Doctor." They were allowed to see Julia, who was resting in her hospital bed, looking frail but conscious. Samuel took her hand, his heart aching at the sight of her vulnerability. "I'm sorry," Julia whispered, her voice weak. "I didn't mean to scare you." "Don't apologize," Samuel said softly. "We're just glad you're okay. We'll get through this together." Peter sat on the edge of the bed, holding his mother's other hand. "We're here for you, Mom. Always." In the following weeks, Samuel supported Julia's recovery. Despite the challenges, Julia's spirit remained unbroken. She took her recovery seriously, determined not to let her condition dictate her life. She slowly resumed her work at the restaurant, starting with lighter tasks and gradually taking on more responsibilities as her strength returned. One evening, after the restaurant had closed, Samuel and Julia sat in the kitchen, discussing new menu ideas. The atmosphere was filled with a sense of renewal and hope. "What do you think of adding a seasonal menu?" Julia suggested, her eyes bright with enthusiasm. "We could use locally sourced ingredients and change it every few months." Samuel smiled. "I love it. It's innovative and keeps things fresh for our customers. Let's start planning the first one for spring." Their collaboration brought a new energy to the urban haven. Julia's culinary creativity and Samuel's business acumen proved to be a powerful combination. Together, they introduced new dishes that quickly became customer favorites, further solidifying the restaurant's reputation. Peter, too, found his place in this new dynamic. He started helping out after school, learning the ropes of the business, and even contributing his own ideas. The sense of belonging and purpose he found at the restaurant helped him thrive, both at school and at home. One night, as they sat around the dinner table, Samuel looked at Julia and Peter, feeling a profound sense of gratitude. "I'm proud of us," he said. "We've faced some tough times, but we've come through stronger." Julia smiled, her eyes filled with warmth. "We have, haven't we? And it's because we have each other." Peter nodded, a grin spreading across his face. "We're a team." As they raised their glasses in a toast, Samuel felt a renewed sense of purpose. The journey had not been easy, but the challenges had only strengthened their bond. They had proven that with resilience, determination, and mutual support, they could overcome anything. Together, they continued to build not just a successful restaurant, but a family rooted in love, strength, and the promise of a brighter future. The early morning sunlight streamed through the windows of the urban haven, casting a warm glow over the bustling kitchen. Julia moved with renewed energy, her movements confident and precise. She had fully regained her health, and it showed in every dish she prepared. The staff had come to admire her, not just for her culinary skills, but for her resilience and unwavering spirit. "Julia, this new dish is a hit," Samuel said, tasting a spoonful of her latest creation. "Customers can't get enough of it." Julia smiled, a genuine warmth in her eyes. "I'm glad they like it. It feels good to be back, contributing in a meaningful way." "You've always been an integral part of this place," Samuel replied. "Your passion and creativity are what make the urban haven special." As the restaurant continued to thrive, Peter's progress in school was equally remarkable. With Samuel's guidance and support, he had transformed from a wary street boy into a promising student. His grades improved, and he even joined the school soccer team, finding a new sense of belonging and purpose. One evening, after the restaurant had closed and the last of the customers had left, Julia and Samuel sat in the dining area, enjoying a quiet moment. "Samuel," Julia began, her tone thoughtful, "I've been thinking a lot about what we've achieved here, and I have an idea I want to share with you." Samuel looked at her, intrigued. "Go on." Julia took a deep breath. "You remember how you helped Peter and me when we were at our lowest? How you gave us a chance when we needed it most?" "Of course," Samuel said, nodding. "It's something I'll never forget." "Well," Julia continued, "there are so many kids out there, just like Peter was, lost, hungry, and without hope. I was thinking, what if we opened a charitable restaurant, a place where homeless kids can get a hot meal and a safe place to stay? We could use our skills and resources to make a real difference." Samuel's eyes widened, and a smile slowly spread across his face. "Julia, that's an incredible idea. It aligns perfectly with everything we believe in." "So you'll do it?" Julia asked, her eyes searching his. "Absolutely," Samuel replied without hesitation. "Let's start planning right away." The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity as they set their plan into motion. Samuel and Julia spent countless hours brainstorming, researching, and meeting with community leaders to secure support for their new venture. They decided to name the restaurant Hope's Kitchen, symbolizing the promise of a better future for the children they aimed to help. Peter, excited by the prospect, contributed his ideas as well. "We could have a reading corner," he suggested one evening at dinner, "with books, and maybe even some tutoring sessions." "That's a great idea, Peter," Julia said, beaming with pride. "Education is just as important as a good meal." The whole community rallied around their cause, donating time, money, and resources to bring Hope's Kitchen to life. The restaurant was set up in a refurbished building not far from the urban haven, with a warm, welcoming atmosphere that made everyone feel at home. The day of Hope's Kitchen's grand opening had finally arrived. The morning sun bathed the refurbished building in a golden glow, and the warm, inviting interior seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The air was filled with the rich aroma of freshly baked bread and the comforting scent of homemade soup. The decorations were simple but heartfelt, reflecting the spirit of the place. Samuel Nelson stood by the entrance, watching as the first guests trickled in. The children's eyes widened in awe as they took in the cozy atmosphere. It was a stark contrast to the harsh streets they were used to. Samuel's heart swelled with pride and a deep sense of fulfillment. This was more than just a restaurant. It was a sanctuary. Julia joined him, her face glowing with happiness. "It's beautiful, Samuel. More than I ever imagined." "We did it together," Samuel replied, his voice filled with emotion. "This is just the beginning." Peter rushed over, his excitement barely contained. "The kids love it, Mom! Mr. Nelson, look! They're all smiling." Samuel smiled, ruffling Peter's hair. "That's what it's all about, Peter. Giving them a place where they can feel safe and happy." As the room filled with laughter and chatter, Samuel couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them here. From his own troubled childhood to the challenges they had faced together, every step had led to this moment. He looked around, seeing not just the faces of the children, but also the faces of those who had supported their mission. Volunteers, donors, and community members had all come together to make Hope's Kitchen a reality. Julia walked over to one of the tables where a young girl was sitting alone, looking shy and uncertain. She knelt down to the girl's level, her voice gentle. "Hi there. I'm Julia. What's your name?" The girl looked up, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and curiosity. "Emily," she whispered. "Well, Emily, we're so glad you're here," Julia said with a warm smile. "How about we get you something to eat?" Emily nodded, a small smile creeping onto her face. Julia took her hand and led her to the buffet, where Peter was helping serve food. Samuel watched them, feeling a profound sense of gratitude. Julia's kindness and Peter's enthusiasm were infectious, spreading warmth and hope throughout the room. As the day went on, more and more children arrived, each one greeted with the same warmth and compassion. The staff worked tirelessly to ensure that everyone felt welcome and cared for. Samuel moved through the crowd, talking to volunteers and guests, sharing stories and listening to theirs. The sense of community was palpable, a testament to what they had built together. In a quiet moment, Samuel found himself standing by the window, looking out at the city that had once been so unforgiving. He thought about Julia's unwavering support and Peter's resilience. He thought about the children who had found a new sense of hope within these walls. The journey had been long and arduous, but it had been worth every step. Julia joined him, slipping her arm through his. "Penny for your thoughts?" Samuel smiled, his gaze still on the bustling street outside. "Just thinking about how far we've come. This place, it's more than I ever dreamed of." "It's just the beginning," Julia said softly. "We have so much more we can do, so many more lives to touch." Samuel turned to her, his eyes shining with determination. "You're right. This is just the start. We'll keep pushing forward, together." As the sun began to set, casting a warm glow over Hope's Kitchen, Samuel felt a deep sense of peace. The restaurant had become a beacon of hope and resilience, a place where second chances were given freely and with love. The impact of their work was felt by everyone who stepped through the doors, a legacy of kindness that would endure for years to come. The evening wound down, and as the last guests left, Samuel, Julia, and Peter stood together, looking out at the empty dining room. The sense of accomplishment was overwhelming, but so was the promise of what lay ahead. "We've done something incredible here," Samuel said, his voice thick with emotion. "But there's still so much more to do." Julia nodded, her eyes filled with hope. "And we'll do it. Together." Peter grinned, his youthful optimism a perfect counterbalance to the gravity of the moment. "We're a team, right?" Samuel placed a hand on Peter's shoulder, pulling Julia close. "Yes, we are. And we always will be." As they stood there, in the quiet of Hope's kitchen, Samuel reflected on the journey that had brought them together. The challenges they had faced, the triumphs they had celebrated, and the unbreakable bonds they had formed. He knew that the future held many more obstacles, but he also knew that with kindness, perseverance, and each other, they could overcome anything. Hey everyone. Thanks so much for watching our story about Hope's Kitchen. I hope you found it as inspiring as we did creating it. Samuel, Julia, and Peter's journey is a powerful reminder that, with kindness, perseverance, and a little bit of hope, we can overcome any obstacle. It's stories like these that highlight the importance of community and the impact we can all have when we come together to help those in need. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button for more heartwarming and inspirational stories. And remember, you can make a difference in your own community too. Sometimes, all it takes is a small act of kindness to change someone's life. Thank you for being part of our community. Let's keep spreading positivity and making the world a better place, one story at a time. See you in the next video.